here at the flight technology module. So I go to my module lab thing on the website, click on flight technology. I believe we're on activity 4 here. And it talks about ask your teacher for a rocket construction sheet. Here's a rocket construction sheet right here. You can see you got the body tube and the fins, and you've got the nose cone and a few other items you might need there. And these pieces of paper, when you're done, should end up looking something. Let's see if I can get this in front of the camera. I like this rocket here. Okay, pretty cool stuff. All right, so the first thing we need to do is cut all of these things out with scissors. Now, if I move my camera over here, you should see in the drawer, there's usually some scissors, some tape, a ruler. There might be some spare tubes here, or they might be on the shelf. This is what we're going to use to build our rocket around, so it's the proper size so that when we shoot our rocket, it will actually fit on the rocket launcher. Okay, but for now, I'm going to take my scissors. I'm going to cut these guys out. Not too exciting, but you want to do a decent job cutting along the lines best you can. Out. Now, you will find sometimes in the bottom drawer there are leftover pieces. So if you have an oops, meaning an accident, you accidentally cut somewhere you're not supposed to, or you just cut and it comes out terrible, there may be spare parts. But what we're trying to do is have each student use only one of these rocket construction sheets because we don't have an unlimited amount of them. Okay, so here's my first piece, my body tube. All right, then I've got these guys here. I think we're going to go for 3 fins, so we don't have to cut out all 4. You can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4 of these guys. So if I cut these out, cut the solid lines. Do not cut on the dotted lines. It says right on here. So I'm only going to cut on these black solid lines. And the dotted lines are actually for folding. And you'll see later on in the video where we do that to make these flat pieces of paper into a more 3-dimensional type thing for the fin. 1, 2. So I've got 4. I've actually got an extra fin there. All right, and the last one, this guy's a little tricky to cut out. Make sure you don't cut off these tabs. Those are actually kind of important. So you got to cut around those guys, which is a little bit tricky. My advice is to then come at them this way. And then that piece drops away. Cut at them this way. Cut at them this way and like this. And then what you can do is cut off these extra pieces here. Right, still got to cut out on these black lines here. And that's probably the only real tricky part of this whole cutting out business. All right, so now I should have my body tube. I should have my nose cone, and I should have a handful of fins here. All right, that's a good start. You also want to make sure you put your name on these things, at least your initials, with a pen or a pencil, because other people, other periods, maybe even the same period, are also building the rocket. So you might want to put your name on these. My name is Mr. Pat. Oh, there's even a spot here on the fin for name, Mr. Pat, etc. All right, so you want to make sure you label your stuff. All right, okay, so the first thing I want to do is kind of mess around with this, what ends up being the nose cone, the tip of the rocket here, okay? The it's a little tricky. What I want you to do is everywhere there's one of these lines, I want you to take a pen, and there's some probably in the drawer here. This is what we call a ballpoint pen. It's not like a Sharpie. It's got a kind of a metal roller on it. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw kind of hard on every one of these lines. You can probably hear the sound of my pen bearing down. And what I'm doing is a thing called scoring. Scoring is when you kind of cut halfway through something so that it'll fold nicely on the lines. I can show you another example in a minute, but let me finish scoring these guys. Okay, so every single one of these lines here. When I do this, even if the ink's not working very good in the pen, I'm more worried about just kind of pushing about halfway through the paper. What that's going to do is allow my paper to fold nicely along those lines. What we're trying to do is go from something that's flat to something that looks kind of cone-shaped. And this step is really important to make that happen. Okay, so I've just scored all those. Here's a piece of cardboard. If I want to fold it exactly somewhere, if I just score it with my pen, I haven't cut all the way through it. I've only gone about halfway through it, but see how nicely it bends on there? If I did it in another place down here, and I scored it again, it would fold on that line too. See how my cardboard is folding nice and easy there on the scored lines? So that's kind of what I did with this piece of paper here. So after I've scored this, as I kind of roll this guy, it turns into this nice cone shape. Okay, you don't want to go all the way through the paper. And this is a little tricky, but you just kind of keep on rolling it in your fingers. And my goal, if you can see on the camera, there's an arrow here and here. And I think I remember a trick where I actually, if you cut a little bit of the tip off, it makes it a little easier too. I'm just going to cut a little bit of the tip off, see if that helps me. Roll this guy up. Yeah, that actually worked pretty nicely. And you can see I've almost got those two arrows pointing right at each other there, okay? Now, one thing about this module I can promise you is that you're going to use a lot of masking tape, all right? So here is Mr. Pat's masking tape hack, all right? Masking tape is annoying because it sticks to itself and it sticks to you. But here's what I like to do. I like to take a piece of masking tape like so and then cut it with the scissors. And I'm going to need a lot of pieces of masking tape, so I might do this 3, 4, 5 times, knowing that I'm going to need all these pieces. Okay, this is going to save you a ton of time and also probably keep you from going nuts having the tape stick to your fingers and such. So I've got those arrows pretty closely lined up there, and this thing looks a lot like the point of this rocket. Okay, so I'm going to take a piece of tape here, and I'll tape it right down the middle, kind of roll that around. I can always cut off some of this excess tape if it's in my way. And I might even go this way a little bit too, kind of go around the cone. But basically, the paper is just the guide. What makes this rocket strong and rugged and durable, and so that it doesn't fall apart when we launch it, is that we're building it out of tape. So tape is your friend, even though sometimes it might feel like an enemy. Okay, so there's my nose cone. Not perfect, but it looks pretty good. Maybe one more piece of tape just to make sure it's nice and strong. Wrinkles are bad. The smoother you can tape things together, the neater your rocket's going to look. So, you've never seen a rocket that NASA sends up into space looking all messy and wrinkled and lumpy. So let's try to make ours as nice as possible. All right. Now, the thing is, we want this nose cone to be hard. If I look at this rocket here and when I squeeze it, it doesn't give. So what the trick for that is, you take some tissue from a Kleenex box, okay, and you just kind of twist it up and stick it in there. You can kind of jam it in there with a pen or maybe the tips of the scissors. Be careful you don't hurt yourself, obviously, but if you just kind of cram that tissue in there, and you're probably thinking, well, tissue is not that strong, but if you push it in there nice and tight, it'll really make this nose cone pretty solid. And I want to make sure that I'm keeping these tabs out. You see these guys here? These 3 guys here, they're pretty important later on in this process when we attach it to the rocket. You can see I've got the Kleenex went a little bit further in there than I had hoped. So maybe I need another piece of tissue or another half a piece of tissue to kind of pack in there, right? A little bit more. Stick it in there. You can use your finger, I guess, at this point. But yeah, I want to try to fill it right up to the edge there. And of course I have some scissors here. Don't cut off your tabs when you do this, but I can either tear it off or use my scissors to cut it off. Look at that. I got myself a nice round nose cone. Maybe I'll cut off this tiny little tip here. Oh yeah, that's nice. Look at that. Filled with the tissue. When I squeeze this guy, it's pretty hard. I mean, not like hard as a rock, but it's solid. It's not going anywhere, okay? That's going to be really good for our rocket later. And as always, I want to make sure my name is on this guy. So it's a little tricky with pen. But anyway, you want to make sure you put your name on this because if you lose it or somebody else picks it up and says, oh, no, that one was mine, you're going to be bummed out. Okay, so make sure your name is on this guy. All right, that's the next step, making this nose cone.